Hiring shouldn't be a hassle or a drain on your budget. Upwork is your one stop shop to find, hire, and pay top freelance talent, saving you time and keeping costs in check all in one place. Do you know the secret to businesses that are scaling faster than ever? Well, they're using Upwork to tap into a diverse pool of skilled freelancers across various industries. With more than 2 decades of experience with a simple and ambitious goal to pioneer a better way of working. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, get help drafting a job post, and even book a consultation. From there, you can connect with freelancers that get you and can easily hire them to take your business to the next level. Upwork makes the entire process easier, simpler, and more affordable with industry low fees. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with a top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com. Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, and we have a lot to get into on tonight's episode as we're going to talk about FanGraphs' new top 50 prospects list for the Baltimore Orioles farm system. We're going to go through some of the interesting notes and reports to come from that story, which, as always, written by Eric Longenhagen, who does very good work over at FanGraphs. We're also going to discuss the hot starts to the season for Vance Honeycutt and Austin O'Verne, a pair of outfielders at Aberdeen. But first, we're going to dive into Brandon Young, who is pounding on the door of the major leagues at this point. Now, if you look at his most recent start, which came against Gwinnett on Sunday, you might think that it was probably a down outing. 5 runs in as many innings pitched for the Tides, but Young overall still had a decent start in this game. 13 whiffs, and with his performance on Sunday, he has now fanned 17 batters while walking just 2 over his first 16 to third innings pitched this season to go along with 2.76 ERA, 2.58 FIP, and 3.03 xFIP over 16 and a third innings pitched. And it's easy to imagine, given the injury to Zach Eflin, as well as the fact that Young is on the 40-man roster, that had Friday's game between the Orioles and Blue Jays not been postponed and pushed to July, that we might have seen Young make his major league debut over the weekend. As it is, it lines up that could happen on Friday night when the Orioles host the Reds at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. So we'll talk about what Young is doing so far in AAA and what his assignment to the major leagues, if it does come, could mean for the Orioles, even if it does prove to be a short-term promotion. So, Nick, I will start with you here. What has stood out to you about Young so far in the early goings of this season?
I really love what he's shown us so far. You mentioned the last outing, and I knew, posting something online, I knew eyes would instantly gravitate towards the 5 runs given up because nobody wants to look at the full context of the start. It was still very good. And actually, those first 2 or so innings of that last start, probably the best he's looked all season, to be honest, as far as the swing and miss stuff and everything. But you look at Brandon Young's made 3 starts already this year. He's up to 16 innings. A 2.76 ERA comes with a 2.23 FIP. 26% strikeout rate, just a 3% walk rate. He's only walked 2 guys, and he's throwing strikes at nearly a 70% clip. He had, 5 or something shutout innings, no hit innings against Charlotte earlier. That was last week on the 5th, 8 strikeouts and a walk. He's been dominant. And you look at the breakdown of his stuff, I mean, it's 5 pitches, and 4 of his 5 offerings grade out at 100 to 107 stuff plus. And the weakest right now is the four-seam fastball, which is only grading out at a 94 stuff plus. But I think that's because the velo just hasn't been what we saw in spring training. It's averaging just below 94 miles per hour right now. And obviously in spring and early on, we were seeing him average 95. So I think losing those 2 ticks probably brings that down a little bit. But at the end of the day, this is a pretty complete pitch mix here. The changeup is the most fascinating pitch that I see. It's the second most used offering. He throws it in the zone at an absurd rate and gets a ton. He's getting a 35% whiff rate on just the changeup alone. And whenever he does throw it out of the zone, hitters are chasing it more than 43% of the time. Like this is really good stuff. And this is, you mentioned the FanGraphs list we'll talk about later on. FanGraphs big believers in Brandon Young and what he could bring to a starting rotation at the major league level. Hopefully this can translate to success in the big leagues, but he has done everything he can, I think, up to this point and set himself up very well for when the Orioles do need him. He could potentially be a pretty viable option here for the Orioles.
Yeah. And also, it was also pretty chilly the last week or so in the area. So maybe that could have something to do with the velo dropping a bit. And even more context, how about you're a rain out away from making your major league debut on Sunday? Game rains out on Friday. Nope, you're starting game one of Saturday's doubleheader instead to line you up for next week to take Eflin's spot. You heard that here first. I'm calling our shot there. But yeah, I think he's been absolutely fantastic. Everything you could have hoped for him. And if you haven't seen him pitch, first of all, go on Bally Sports Live. Everything is free. All the minor league games are free on that app. Check out one of his starts because he could be Dean Kramer with a better fastball, a splitter that doesn't just hang in the middle of the zone, and throw more strikes. I think he could be like what Dean Kramer we wish he could have been. I think Dean Kramer, unfortunately, is pretty much just an innings eater now. I think Brandon Young can be more than that. I think he could eventually be a middle of the rotation guy. Zach Eflin, speaking of just taking his place, I mean, this guy is looking like Zach Eflin throwing the strikes this year. And with better stuff, honestly. So, yeah, I think it's coming. I think Orioles fans are going to like him because he's calm. He's very professional looking on the mound. He's got cool hair, just like Dean Kramer. And, he throws strikes. He lives around the zone. All of his pitches he can throw for strikes. Why did my volume drop? But, yeah, I think he could be, and I've said this before, but I think he could be the rare case of a guy that comes up and actually finds some success pretty immediately just because of his demeanor and the mix of pitches that he's got and the way he can throw them off for strikes. So I'm excited to see it and hopefully gives them a reason not to send him back down.
Well, and we hope that with Zach Eflin, this injury proves to be a relatively short-term thing because the last thing the Orioles need is another long-term injury in their rotation. But even if Young, let's say, only comes up for a couple of starts, and regardless of how he performs, he's going to go back to Norfolk because they want him to continue to work out of a rotation, and there just isn't a spot for him in Baltimore at that point. What can he do to show the Orioles when he's up that he can be a reliable option for them sometime later in the season?
Just exactly what he's been doing down in AAA right now. I mean, we know. What did he throw? 111 innings, I feel like. I can't remember how much he threw last year. It was well over 100 innings he threw last year. And this coming off his second Tommy John and really having very little mileage on his arm going back to his early college days at Louisiana Lafayette because the 2020 season was his final year over there. And obviously that was cut short after just like 2 or 3 outings. So very little mileage on Young's arm, and he very quickly worked up to well over 100 innings last year. So we know he can go deep into games, and it's the success he's had in AAA going back to last year plus this year combined. The fact that he's not a nibbler, he doesn't rely on nibbling around the edges. He doesn't rely on getting guys to chase junk. It is just, here's my stuff. Here's my very good fastball. Here's my very good changeup. You talk about Dean Kramer, like, where's the curveball? Brandon Young's curveball isn't going anywhere. Like, this is like 2,800 RPM curveball with a ton of great shape. Like, that's a pitch that's going to stick around with him as well. Like, you've got all this stuff with Brandon Young that he's so dominant in the zone already. Again, he has to make that jump to the major leagues, but it's there. Like, he's got nothing left to prove down in AAA. So he's going to be able to give you some innings, hopefully. And the fact that it's not like a Chase McDermott or DL Hall where you're hoping, can you get it in the zone? He's already lives in the zone. So that's what kind of is making me a lot more optimistic about Young.
Yeah, it's just like Nick said, if he just continues to do what he's been doing in spring training into AAA start of their season, then I think they might try to find room for him. If not now, then later, because Dean Kramer has an option. Obviously, Cade Povich has options. I don't think this would happen just yet, but maybe later in the season, Sagano could go to the bullpen. Maybe his stuff could play up better there as everyone gets healthy, and eventually some of these guys that are in the rotation now are not going to be later. So yeah, I think if he just does what he's been doing, then they're going to have every reason to keep him in that rotation, especially the way things have gone so far.
We'll shift gears now to talk about Vance Honeycutt. The Orioles' first-round pick in last year's draft is playing his first full season in professional baseball. He's starting out the 2025 campaign at Aberdeen, and the Bats seemed to come alive in their series last week against Jersey Shore as Honeycutt tapped into a little bit of power in a 7-for-18 performance that saw him belt the first professional home run of his career and total 3 extra base hits. And his numbers to this point in the season are pretty strong. You look at the WRC plus right now, sitting at 183 over his first 40 plate appearances. That's a pretty eye-popping number. Now, we know with Honeycutt, the discourse revolves around the swing and miss tendencies. Is he going to strike out too much to be successful as a professional baseball player? And so far, we're seeing a lot of strikeouts. He's struck out in 32.5% of his plate appearances while walking 22.5%. Typically, we look for the strikeout and walk numbers to sort of level off when you get to 60 plate appearances. And Honeycutt should hit that number this week as Aberdeen hosts Brooklyn. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the strikeout rate is going to remain high all year, that the walk rate is going to remain above 20%. But just wherever that number is when it's around 60%, we can expect it to end up somewhere generally in that range. So far with Honeycutt this season, we're kind of seeing the good and a little bit of the bad at the plate, and he's also playing a pretty good outfield defense to go along with that. So, Bob, I'll start with you. We've talked a lot about Honeycutt on the show, but very little of it has been based in actual performance because he really did not have a lot of time out of the draft last year. So these first couple weeks of this season are the first meaningful sample size, however limited, we've had of Honeycutt on the field. What have your impressions been of him so far?
All the disclaimers that you've given. I mean, yeah, the strikeout rate between 60, 70 plate appearances, the walk rate between 120 and 130 plate appearances, that's when those things start to stabilize. But I think already, I feel like, and I'm not a scout, but the swing looks a little more in control to me than it did last year when we saw him briefly. Maybe it's just because he's making more contact that it feels that way. But I like what I've seen. Obviously, the results are great, so that's good. But he's hitting the ball hard when he hits it, and he's flying around the bases. He's got a double, a triple, making some great defensive plays. Yeah, I can't complain. And now that he's actually putting results to the field, then that just gives me more confidence that he can at least put himself in a position to where him and the team can work together to get him to where he needs to be in a few years to help the major league team.
You mentioned the weather with Brandon Young. This was all 4 levels, and Aberdeen specifically was playing in, I think the broadcast they mentioned a couple of times where it got down to like 35 degrees for some of these games. So that's why I think you saw a lot of like random little injuries. I think Thomas Sosa hit the IL because of, ankle thing. Like guys like rolling ankles, things aren't getting loosened up. The ground's harder. I don't know what's going on early on in the year, but a lot of talk in that Aberdeen broadcast about hitters and, who has it tougher this cold early in the year, the hitters or the pitchers. And they seem to believe it was the hitters. Well, Aberdeen hitters didn't get the memo because there was a lot of hard contact in that series, and Honeycutt was in the middle of that. Yes, the strikeout rate is high right now at 32%, but when you're running a 22.5% walk rate, I like that part of the game. And he's got a 72% contact rate right now and a 9% swinging strike rate. And if you look at his very small sample size last season, he had a 59% contact rate and a 17% swinging strike rate. So don't want to get ahead of myself when it comes to any of these guys and 9-game sample, but I think all things considered and understanding who Honeycutt is and his massive deficiencies, I don't really think you could ask for a much better start from him through 9 games. So I'd love to see the breakdown between like individual pitches. Like, is he getting hammered with sliders and not making any contact there? Is this all against fastballs, against, more inexperienced high A pitchers? I don't know, but baby steps through 9 games. I'm pretty pleased with what I've seen from Vance Honeycutt.
Yeah, there's a lot of long sleeves in those games, especially over the weekend, but really the last week and a half. And yeah, honestly, velocity might be down a little bit because of the cold weather. I'm sure the bat speed's down. I'm sure the bat speeds this past week will be a little bit slower than in the middle of July when it's 90 degrees out there. So yeah, it's also good context to have.
Yeah, tuning in a little bit for that Aberdeen at Jersey Shore series. The weather and the conditions just looked miserable up there. And with Honeycutt, I go back to something that Nick said. The lack of contact and the very limited sample size that we saw of him in pro ball after the draft last year was the one thing that kept coming up in off-season reports about Honeycutt. And this is something that I touched on in a Patreon episode this week, which is that depending on what national report on Honeycutt you read, you think that he's one fix away from being a legitimate five-tool player, or that the strikeouts are just going to keep him from ever being more than maybe a replacement level fourth outfielder who sticks around the big leagues because he's got power and can play center field, but strikes out way too much to be a regular. We have seen a lot of that surrounding Honeycutt since he was drafted out of UNC, and honestly, even going back to before the draft. So it has been nice to actually get eyes on Honeycutt for ourselves in the little bit of the sample size that we've had so far. And I agree with Nick. Knowing what we know about Honeycutt, this is probably the best start you could ask for.
Like 72% contact rate isn't great, right? But it's a big improvement so far through about the same sample size we had last year. So I am encouraged by Honeycutt. You know, I kind of predicted with a lot of these guys in Aberdeen, we expect slow starts, especially from some of the college guys. I mean, not just the international players who are, 20 years old. And very clearly, guys like, we're going to talk about Leandro Arias and Aaron Estrada and some other guys later on. They're playing in this cold weather, probably for the first time in their careers. And you can tell by the way a lot of these guys are dressed that it was a pretty tough week. But it's just even the college guys like Overn and Honeycutt and these guys, Griff O'Farrell, like they're getting used to the pro regiment and the pro lifestyle here. And so you see a lot of struggles. And these guys are coming out of the gates pretty hot, which is encouraging to see. Normally, we saw Matthew Etzel come out the gates hot last year, but we're seeing like this entire Aberdeen roster come out of the gates hot. And with Vance Honeycutt up there in the middle of this order, kind of leading the way. So pretty good to see. And that's the best part of it. It's no more, hypotheticals or what ifs. There's still a lot of what ifs, obviously, but to finally have eyes on Honeycutt and to watch the swing and to watch him against pretty good competition and to see his early results, super promising.
And there's another outfielder at Aberdeen who's getting off to a pretty good start, and that's Austin Overn. Through his first 6 games, he's posted a 163 WRC plus, while walking 18.5% of the time, striking out a little bit under 30% of the time, but showing plenty of power with 2 home runs. He's also stolen 4 bases. Now, Overn did not appear in the 3 games over the weekend, including both ends of Saturday's twin bill, as well as Sunday's finale at Jersey Shore. We don't know why yet. There has not been an official report about whether or not he's hurt. It's worth noting that the last time he did appear in a game, which was on Thursday, he played all 9 innings of that contest. But he's off to an excellent start this year. And to top all of that off, it was also a pretty good week for him off the field, because this FanGraphs top 50 list, which we're going to dive into more in a moment, had Overn ranked 4th in the Orioles farm system behind only the number 1 prospect, Samuel Basayo, followed by Kobe Mayo, and then Chase McDermott. To put that into perspective, Overn ranked 3 spots ahead of Enrique Bradfield Jr., who's currently on the IL at Chesapeake, but had gotten off to a very nice start before hitting the IL last week, and 5 spots ahead of Honeycutt. Now, Nick, I'm going to start with you because you wrote a piece about Overn over the offseason over our Substack, talking about how he could be one of the breakouts of this season. And so far from what we were seeing, he's well on his way to a breakout.
Yeah, and it's not just... I was shocked to see him at 4 on that FanGraphs list, first of all. Like that, I thought that was uber aggressive. I thought we might have been a little bit aggressive, and I don't know where he's on our list, 20-something, I believe. But I thought we were being a touch aggressive. Apparently, we are the low people on Austin O'Verne. But yeah, it's a lot of changes from reports at the Cape Cod League where he had this rebound from his down sophomore year at USC. There are a lot of reports, people who had eyes on him there, who said he overhauled a lot of things in the box, the swing, the setup, all of this, and it translated into immediate success in the Cape Cod League. Matt Blood said right after the draft that they had been on O'Verne from very early on in the draft process. And so I think they were pretty quick to pull the trigger there on him in the draft when they saw that success in the Cape Cod League, and it's translating well. And one thing that I believed, and I think I wrote about this in the article, is that I felt like the power is going to be there. He has the elite speed. He has the top-notch defense. But I really think he's a prime candidate to showcase more power as a pro, and he's doing that immediately from the jump this year. And it's not just the power, like it's a quick, violent swing that he can get balls out of the ballpark in a hurry. But he also had a couple of plays. There's a play, Chandler Simpson, the Tampa Bay Rays speedy prospect, Enrique Bradfield Jr. wannabe over there. Hope you don't hear that one. But there was a play like the second day of the season, Chandler Simpson hit like a routine ground ball to second base and he beat it out for a base hit. And every MILB account was like, look at this speed. It's amazing. Austin O'Verne did the same thing like the next night. And that wasn't on any highlight reel. And not only the power in that, but there was even another play. I think he noticed third base playing deep, whatever. He laid down a bunt, used the speed. So all the debate about bunting. Austin O'Verne recognized the hole in the defense there, decided to lay down the bunt, flew down the first base, gets on back. He's doing it all. I put a feeler out to try to get a report on the injury. No luck there. So don't know. Hopefully on Tuesday's lineup, he is in it. We'll see. But hopefully it was nothing serious. Maybe just too cold. USC California boy needed a day off. I don't know. But yeah, electric start for Austin O'Verne.
The fact that he wasn't put on the IL at all gives me some hope that it was just something minor. And hey, it's cold out, can't get loosened up. Don't rush it. That's fine. Because like we've talked about here, off to an incredible start. Yeah, it really is starting to feel like he is going to be a steal of that draft, just because he's got the tools of a Honeycutt / EBJ with power. Seemingly so far, obviously a long way to go, but he's clearly a great athlete, has taken up well to the Orioles player development and coaching and has put it to good use so far. If he can keep it up, just what's one more center field type defender with speed, power, and hit tool? Can't have enough of those guys. Yeah, I'm excited to see how he can continue to translate this success in 2025.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
And we'll go now to that FanGraphs list, which we get, a lot of lists obviously come out ranking the Orioles farm system. We do one ourselves every year. But of the non-Orioles on the Verge lists that are out there, one of our favorite ones to really dissect is the FanGraphs list, because there's a lot of data in there that is not necessarily publicly available. It's interesting the way that Eric Longenhagen and team put together the rankings. Eric had the byline on his own this year for this piece, and it includes some injury notes on some things that we were unaware of. So, for instance, that Ellis Cuevas is sidelined right now with a hamstring issue. There's a couple of other notes in there as well, but the rankings always are interesting, and some can make you scratch your head at first, but then when you dive into these really detailed reports, you can kind of see the perspective a little bit more. So whether that's Elvin Garcia, young international prospect recently signed by the Orioles, ranking 5th overall behind Auvergne, or a guy like Michael Ferret, who we're pretty high on, being all the way down at 24. There's some things in this list that are pretty interesting to sit there and look at. So, Nick, I'll start with you. I know you've had a chance to really go through all of the reports in there. What stood out to you?
I mean, I feel like high level, though, when you look at this list compared to our list, yeah, there was shout out to, who was it, EJ in the Discord, who put together the comparison sheet that had where the differences in where we rank guys on our list versus where Eric has his on this FanGraphs list. That was pretty cool to look at. But I think high level, like there's still, when you look at this 10 through like 20 range, it's basically all pitchers. Gibson, Fruit, De Leon, Weston, Nunez, Bragg, Herman, also like pitcher heavy right outside the top 10, which I think that's pretty similar to our list there. But there is one name, I don't know why, just randomly, in the top 50 of this list, plus the bonus sections he puts down at the bottom, which are also very interesting reads. There is a name that is not mentioned at all. You guys know who's missing? Luis Almeida is nowhere to be found. I thought that was pretty interesting from his list there. But yeah, this was a couple things that stood out to me. Where's my thing here? The Auvergne thing we talked about. Trey Gibson, like just nothing really new in the write-up that we didn't already know. But to reiterate a point from Eric's list here, he has Trey Gibson at number 10 on the Orioles list. And he says he's a good roster 4-5, but if the improvements are the improvements for 2024 are start of a trend in his stuff, he's a mid-rotation starter. And last year was just about building him back up after not pitching for a year. So I think there's reason to believe that last year was just a start towards even better stuff. And the Orioles signed him as an undrafted free agent after the 2023 draft. Nobody wanted him. And now you have a national evaluator saying this could be a mid-rotation arm at the major league level. That really stood out to me specifically. But yeah, good to see like the international guys like Esteban Mejia getting some love up on this list. Like, it's fun. And it is unique how he ranks them, but I enjoy the way he ranks them based on, this. I think he kind of looks at like top outcome and ranks them that way, which, I think it makes this list a lot more interesting to read.
Yeah, I do have to give him credit for he is not just following a trend. He's doing his own thing over here, and for better or worse, he's going to live or die by that. And I think he's fine with that. Still, one of my favorite interviews we've ever done on the show, having Eric Longenhagen on here. I want to say 2021 or 2022. He takes chances. He's been wrong before. Colton Cowser, he was wrong, flat out. But he has also been pretty right when it comes to taking his chances on guys. And look, Braxton Bragg, number 16. He's setting the tone right there. We'll see what happens when our list drops in April. But Elvin Garcia up at 5. Insanity. Kind of took Leandro Arias' spot, who he had ranked up pretty high pretty early, but now he's dropped him down, I guess because he doesn't think he has the power that he thought he might develop. But Auvergne at 4. Chase McDermott, he's got a 50 grade on. So that to me says he thinks he can be a mid-rotation starter as well. And yeah, I honestly, crazy day at work, haven't had a chance to completely dive into this, but even Fernando Peguero at number 50 is intriguing, who, last year he was kind of a bounce around guy. They kind of pointed towards organizational depth, but if he's going to be on a top 50 list by someone as smart as Longenhagen, maybe there's something there. And also not every team got even a top 50 rankings. I think out of the 14 he's done so far, only the Orioles with the top 50. Arizona has a top 53 and Tampa Bay has a top 56. Everybody else has less than 50, some in the 30s. So that just speaks to the depth that we've been preaching for the past however many years, but especially over the last year or so. And the fact that, Yeah, that there's different guys up high. It seems like no matter which list, it seems like there's always one or two players that are higher than you might expect. And I think that just screams to the depth once you get past the Basayos and Mayos of the world that this system holds.
Yeah, and for anyone who has not read the list yet, I would encourage you to consider reading it in multiple sittings because I actually think it's good to really go over each report thoroughly. And that's sometimes what I will often do in this. And the other thing is do not stop at the 50th ranked prospect because the notes underneath the rankings are really where I know for myself, I start to mine information for, okay, who's the guy that maybe we're sleeping on or who's the recent international signing that I didn't really know a whole lot about. So there's a lot of good write-ups on relief prospects in this section, as well as some international guys. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that, just as a tease in our next episode with a player that I'm going to highlight, but really make sure that you check that out. And one thing I wanted to point out here, because this is something we've talked about a lot, and I know that our listeners have a big interest in it, is Levi Wells. Eric notes in the write-up that Wells now has a really nasty mid-80s sweeper rather than the below-average bullet-style slider that he was throwing last year. And reading from the report, he says, it's plausible Wells could still be developed as a starter to see where this goes across a bigger workload. The angle of his sweeper looks like it will play as a back foot weapon against lefties, but it would be awfully tempting to put Wells in the express lane to Baltimore if he's going to be parked in a 96 to 100 mile per hour range as a reliever like he has been this spring. And Wells has looked very good down in Chesapeake to begin this season. So I know we're going to talk about this a lot over the course of this year, but where do you guys kind of stand on Wells right now?
I think the Orioles bullpen is pretty solid, and I think there are still some options at AAA right now. Even like a Chase McDermott, who I was just talking about, Brandon Young, if you need be, et cetera, Cade Stroud, not Luis Gonzalez anymore, rest in peace, but not literally, if you haven't heard, he was DFA'd. But yeah, Levi Wells, I think let's build him up as a starter. I think you can pull the trigger on sending him into relief at any point in time, whether it's later this year, next year, the year after, what have you. If you think you can build him up to a mid to back end rotation starter, unless he's going to be like a high leverage 8th or 9th inning closer, setup man, fireman type, which maybe he could be, then I think the starter path is always going to be the one you should lean on at least first before he proves that he cannot reach those heights.
Yeah, he's a 4th round pick they gave $500,000 to, and they have him up in AA despite just 60 innings of intermittent work last year with the shoulder injury. And we've highlighted a couple of times recently about the walk rate difference pre-injury, post-injury was much improved. And then he goes out here in like 40-degree weather and rain, 3 1/3, no walks, 5 strikeouts in his first outing at the AA level. I'm thinking of Aberdeen. Maybe the weather wasn't that bad. Regardless, it was still no walks through 3 1/3 in his first AA outing. So yeah, I agree. You can always, that velo's not going anywhere right now. And so if he's going to be a fastball sweeper, late inning guy down the road, fantastic. If that's his path to the major leagues, but I don't see the Orioles making that transition. I think there are some other guys that are sitting in Chesapeake actually right now, and maybe 1 or 2 guys in Norfolk who, if you want to get crazy with like a late inning relief arm that could pop, I think there are some other options that the Orioles could go to. But Wells, I don't see any reason why right now or this year why you take him off his starter development track.
And we will go now into our final segment of the episode. Last Call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing. Located at 1421 Ridgely Street, Checker Spot is not too far from Memorial Park at Camden Yards, making it the perfect spot for a pre- or post-game beverage. And while you're at Camden Yards this year, be sure to check out the beer stand behind home plate to get one of Checker Spot's signature beers, The Bird is a Word. And with the Orioles in the middle of a long homestand right now, this week it's a perfect time to swing by Checker Spot and grab one of their beers during the game at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. And we'll now dive into the topic of this last call. And it's honestly not something I really want to talk about. I would much rather pull a book off my shelf right here next to me and read an excerpt from it. I will give you the final chapter of Edith Wharton's The Age of Innocence, as opposed to talking about this. But we are an Orioles podcast, so we have to talk about it. The Orioles are 6-9, coming off a weekend split of a rain-shortened 2-game series against the Toronto Blue Jays. They are currently 2.5 games back of first place New York in the American League East. They are in last place. Charlie Morton and Dean Kramer in particular have not looked good out of the rotation, and it has been feast or famine to this point with the lineup. Is it time to panic? Bob, what are your thoughts?
I'm not the panicking type, to be honest with you. I mean, look, I'm not saying you need to feel great about where the Orioles are right now and how they started the season, because I know I sure as hell don't. But let's keep things in perspective here. This is a team we knew coming into the year that was just going to get, knock on wood, better as the year goes on, as guys get healthy, as prospects like Kirby Mayo, potentially Samuel Basayo, before mentioned Brandon Young, Chase McDermott, guys get healthy. Kyle Bradish, Andrew Kittredge, Grayson Rodriguez, the list goes on. And we're 6-9. First place is the Yankees at 9-7. Blue Jays are 9-8. Rays are 8-8. Red Sox are 8-10. We're 2.5 games out of first place in the AL East. It's not like, oh my God, what a hole we have to dig out of. Yeah, it is a hole that we're going to have to dig out of. But honestly, I was more concerned after that final game in Arizona where Kramer got kind of smoked around. The offense was listless. We got shut out. Then we had a day off, a rain out. Offense came to play this weekend. I thought we saw some fire, some life. I loved when Adley crushed his solo home run, the bat flip, looking at the dugout, getting guys fired up. I love to see that. And honestly, Sunday it was a bad loss, but I was not disappointed. The offense was there again, working at bats, performing well. It was one of the worst scorecards I've ever seen that was like very one-sided against the Orioles. And they still should have won that game if it wasn't for the bullpen blowing it, which is just not going to happen very often. So, yeah, I would say no, not time to panic. I understand being disappointed, no doubt about it, but just hang in there. Let's see Jackson Holiday. We were talking about the plate appearance threshold to stabilize walk rate. Hopefully he hasn't hit it. No, he hasn't. I think he's like halfway or less than halfway there, but he's only walked once this season. We know he can work a walk if he gets the pitches to do so. So, yeah, I think Gunner's getting warmed up. I could give a million reasons, but yeah, don't panic. Hang in there. Let's get through April, try to be around 500, and then let's take off from there.
Yeah, I said week before last, right after the season started, last time I was on, it felt like it was already kind of exhausting, that first couple of games of the season. And you quickly realize, at least I quickly realized, that every single night is going to be a battle. Every single night is going to be mentally draining if you are heavily invested into this team. And honestly, talking about before we went live, my trip to Atlanta, went to a Braves Phillies game. It was a great game. Just sit back and watch the fan. It was an amazing baseball game. And I get home from Atlanta. I'm like, I didn't watch the Arizona series because traveling, but I'm like, I felt good. I was at a ballpark for the first time this year. The sights, the smells, all that stuff. I felt rejuvenated. And I was like, why? I don't need to be rejuvenated here like early April, but that's where the Orioles have brought me right now, unfortunately. And then that Blue Jays series, yeah, it was promising. Like the bullpen has been a strength, and Gregory Soto let us down. I think that's going to happen. Felix Bautista is going to blow games this year. Like it's going to happen with these relievers. But I do agree the offense did show some life, specifically Gunner showing some life. I need more of that from Adley, the bat flipping. I need from somebody. Like, we don't need an asshole out there on the field, but like we need some energy on this team. And we don't know what's going on behind the clubhouse. There's obviously a ton of high character, high energy guys on this team, but I need to see some emotion. Like I think it'll fire up the fans, help fire up that dugout. If you want to panic. I don't have the energy to do so at the moment. Like nothing can be done about the offseason at this point. Injuries are going to happen. Unfortunately, the Orioles were hit pretty hard early on. But this roster is also not the roster that the Orioles are going to end the season with. And like ignoring the fans who just want to spew negativity and hatred on social media no matter what, we're all tired already. I feel like on April 14th, we're mentally exhausted when we should still be in the honeymoon phase of baseball season. But yeah, that's how the dice is rolled so far. You mentioned the Orioles are only 2.5 games out of first place with 147 games to go. I was a history major, not a math major, but I think there's enough time to climb to the top of the division. Cedric Mullins' contract year boom is for real. Like Adley, the numbers look fantastic. Gunnar was crushing the ball, and he finally found success this weekend. Just needs some time to settle in. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, I think, that you could pick at to get this offense. It's a middle-of-the-pack offense right now, up to the top of the league. You mentioned Holiday. Kerstad may be walking some more. He seems to be settling in a little bit more. The pitching is what it is. If it can just help us survive halfway through the year, then I think this team would be in a good place. But yeah, it might be impossible for some to believe that you can be optimistic still about this team and not because you're just sucking orange Kool-Aid all day, every day. Like, I'm not happy with this rotation either, but what good is just sitting here complaining and whining going to do? I'm going to keep watching every single night without scrolling through social media because it's very good for the mental state when you do that. We can fire up the Misery podcast in a month or so if things haven't changed.
Not to be toxic positivity over here, but the thing that keeps me going is if the Orioles are miserable, I turn on the minor leagues and there's always something worth watching and getting excited for. So
yeah, I'm not at all happy with what I've seen from this team so far in the first couple of weeks of the season. The rotation has been up and down, but I think we kind of knew to expect that. There's been a few games where the offense has really underperformed, and I think that's going to be the key thing going forward is minimizing that. And if there is a positive to take away from the Toronto series, you're both right, is that the offense held up its end of the bargain. You have a tough Cleveland team coming to town, and I'll just say this. If they can get through the next 6 games at 500, I would be okay with that. And I would feel like they're at least starting to make some progress. But hopefully they turn things up here a little bit before too long. If there is a saving grace, though, I will say this. The AL East is looking pretty flawed out of the gate right now. I really don't think that there's a dominant team in this division. Maybe the Yankees or the Red Sox pick it up. Maybe Toronto is better than we think, or Tampa Bay catches fire, but everyone is showing their flaws right now. So if there's a positive to take away from that is that this division is pretty fallible, and we're seeing that a lot early on. And with that, that does it for this episode. We'll be back later on this week to break down some of the hot starts among minor league pitchers. We're going to point out who's doing well and expect to hear a lot about Aberdeen again in the next episode, but we'll bounce around a little bit more to highlight some other pitchers. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. That will give you access to a bonus weekly show from Bob, Nick, or myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects countdown list and much more. And I will say this, we're not expected to have any graduations at the end of April. Yet I expect that there's going to be some pretty significant changes to the top 50 based on the way players have performed so far. So you should get in on the ground level now and sign up to become a Patreon member today and have access to bonus top 50 updates throughout the season. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.